One of the most vivid memories that I have of my mother when I was growing up, I was 14 years old. My brother was 16. His name was Ken. Ken is in heaven now. He's, again, just a couple years older than I am. But at this particular time, I had come home from school, and I came into the living room of our home there in Riverside, not far from here, and I saw Ken laying on the couch on his side, and he was shaking like he was having a tremor of some kind. But come to find out, he had the chills and he had like a fever going on, because here's what had just happened. He had been riding a skateboard down a very steep hill. And the further he went down that hill, the more speed he was picking up. And of course, speed wobble kicked in. And he was starting to lose control of the skateboard going headlong downhill. And so he saw a patch of grass and started to head that way. The problem was the skateboard had a different plan. The skateboard started going the opposite direction. So in the last second, he just dove and went for it. And he greatly missed. And so for a good 20 feet, he's sliding on asphalt and gravel and sand and pebbles, which when I came home and walked into the living room, my mother was sitting next to him on a very low stool, and piece by piece of gravel and pebble and sand she was taking out of his thrashed skin from head to toe. And all the while that she was taking out these pebbles and taking out the sand, she was praying, she was singing, she was ministering to the Lord with the confidence that God's presence would be there to make all of the difference for my suffering brother. There's something about the gift of the heart of the mother that is of a divine design. Now, me not being one, I've only seen it in, of course, my wife, the mother of my children. I've experienced it in my own mother, but I can only talk about it. I can't say that I've experienced that gift in and from myself, but I know that it's real because I have personally been impacted by the gift of the heart of a mother many, many times in my life. What a treasure. Supernatural gift. I want us to look at one of the most memorable mothers in all of the New Testament. If you'll open your Bible with me to Matthew 15, this is the account of what's called the Syrophoenician woman, who Campbell Morgan has this to say about this mother. He says, this is one of the sweetest stories of them all. It's the mother's heart carrying the need of her daughter with unswerving faith to Him who had created the love of the mother. This is one of the sweetest stories of them all. And as I've read it many, many times in my life, I have never been unastounded by the magnitude of this woman's heart. First of all, a mother's heart is marked with divine sympathy. Let me define sympathy. By today's dictionary, it reads this way: it is a feeling of compassion in agreement with pain or suffering of another. That's sympathy. A feeling of compassion that is in agreement with pain or suffering of another. I can't describe it to you, but when I saw my mother sitting there helping my brother, it seemed as though she was in just as much pain as he was. I could not hardly get her attention to even ask what happened because she was so focused on bringing help to her child. Because sympathy, compassion in agreement with his pain had become her own. It is a supernatural thing. Now, I believe that there is revelation of this even in this precious woman's story here that we'll begin reading in verse 21. Jesus went out from there and he departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And listen to this. A woman of Canaan came from that region. Now, Canaan is a region full of ungodly people. People who had no relationship with God, no covenant with God. As a matter of fact, in different places in Scripture, this is a region that had received all but the curse of sin and death upon it. It was marked for perversion, rebellion, sin, which is basically where we all have come from, out of darkness. But here comes this mother in a heart posture of need, and she comes and cries out to Jesus. Now listen to this and see if you can discern the sympathy. Have mercy on me, O Lord. That's so amazing to me. She didn't say, have mercy on my family, have mercy on my daughter who is suffering. She said, have mercy upon me, as though her daughter's pain and suffering had been embraced in herself. Have mercy upon me. I am suffering. Have mercy upon me, Son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed. He answered her not a word. His disciples came and urged him and said, send her away, for she cries out after us. In answering them, he speaks to his disciples and says, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He's not even talking to her. But she comes and worships him. Other translation says that she fell prostrate at his feet and said, Lord, help me. Oh. But he answered and said, now he will talk to her. It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. He's not calling her a dog as much as he's saying, I have come for the lost house of Israel, and you are on the outside. You are not of the family. I cannot give to you what I have been brought to earth to bring, which is to the house of Israel. You are on the outside, therefore I cannot give you the bread of the children. She basically said, I don't need a whole loaf. Don't even need a slice. And I'm not telling you that I'm not undeserving. But let me appeal to the Son of David, who is an acknowledgement, I believe you are the Messiah. You are the Christ. You are the hope of the nations. You are the hope of my daughter's freedom and healing. She said, yes, Lord. Yet even the little dogs, they eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. Jesus answered and said to her, oh, woman, you have got my attention now. You have conquered my heart. You and I have been in this holy divine test and tussle. You have prevailed. Oh, woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Can you discern the sympathy where the suffering and the pain of this young girl had been absolutely embraced by the gift of her mother. And her mother had carried that pain to the hope, who is Jesus Christ, with the great expectation, an unwavering faith that in Him I will find relief for us. You know, it's different with fathers. Say, how so? Well, being a father, I can speak on this one with pretty clear authority. I've raised 3 kids. A father, I want explanations. Comfort later. I remember when my dad walked in, I was just there watching my mom ministering and my brother shaking and going through the whole thing. My dad walks in, he says, "Hey, what happened?" Well, my mother says, "Well, he was on a skateboard, Ken," and my dad's name is Ken also. He was on a skateboard and he was going down the hill. He looks right at my brother, who can't hardly even breathe, much less talk. He says, "Why were you going down the hill on the skateboard?" See the difference? A mother is sympathetic. I want relief for my children now. We can get explanation later on, but right now the heart of the mother is a lot like the heart of God. You know, a lot of times God doesn't need all of our explanations. He just wants to give us the relief that only He can give. Secondly, this woman, this precious mother, was indeed suffering. She had come to Jesus with one hand holding fast to the pain and the suffering of her daughter, with the hope and the faith that somehow I would be able to lay a hold of the heart of God through this Messiah Christ. Even though I'm from Canaan, I'm from the outside, I'm hopeful that He's merciful. And if I can take hold of the heart of God and bring to Him the pain of my child, I can bring them together as a mediator. If I am willing to bear the suffering with she whom I deeply care about and love. I can't tell you how many times when I lived in San Angelo, Texas, very, very far away from my mother and father, and may I also add, very, very far away from God and Jesus Christ at that time. How many times, miraculously, at just the right moment, my mother would call me. And it seemed as though God had empowered her to keep her hand on my life, while she was doing everything that she could to keep her hand on the heart of God and bring us together into a place of hopeful reconciliation. And she would say things like, "Art, I'm just calling to see that you're okay." Or, "Before you go out tonight," how did she know that? Yeah. "I just want you to know I'm praying for you and I'm praying for your safety." And then pretty soon, after things continued to spiral downward in the wrong direction, she would begin to say things like, "I'm praying that you will come home and make your heart right with God." And of course, in that season, I was as callous as I could be. I was as resistant as I could be. But somehow the seeds of the suffering and the sympathy and the compassion of God made it through her words and found a place in my heart that I absolutely could not resist. It translated into conviction, into challenge. And sometimes that conviction would show up at the most inopportune times when I'm supposed to be having fun. You follow? The gift of a mother's heart is a heart that suffers with a divine burden until all of her children have been made well and have been touched by God. I'm so thankful that even for the salvation and the wholeness of my own children, my wife, the mother of my children, carries a divine burden. Now, it's not something that overwhelms mothers. It's not something that exhausts them or something that tears them down, but it is something that they carry of a silent divine burden until all of her children are well and have truly been touched by God. Number 3, the heart of a mother is seeking. A mother will do what is ever necessary to bring relief and help to her child. This precious woman here in Matthew 15, I can't even imagine. First of all, she's from Canaan. She's Syrophoenician, which is Greek, which is heathen, which is, we don't have covenant with God, and we know that the Jews do. And I'm going to go approach the Messiah of the Jews. And he's surrounded by 12 men who don't like me. Could care less. You follow me? I am going to get to him, and I am going to receive from him what I believe only he has. Thank God for mamas who know how to get to Jesus. She got into that situation and came with a heart posture that could not be denied. This season of time around Mother's Day, maybe you've read the same. There's an article that kind of pops up annually about Goldie Hawn. Goldie Hawn, as many of you know, is an actress. Her husband's name is Kurt Russell. Well, Goldie Hawn tells of an account. Now, she admits, she says, even though I was raised Jewish, I'm not a religious person. She said, however, something happened that forever marked my life. When her son, Oliver, was born, within just a few days, he developed severe complications. And as a newborn, he was taken into the intensive care unit. And in a moment of deep fear and concern, she said, I did not know what else to do, and I did not know to whom else to turn. So I went into his little room, and I put my hand into the little box, and I put my hands upon my child, and I emptied myself out before God. Now, she admits, I'm not religious. I don't walk with God. This woman is not religious. She doesn't have a covenant with God, but God put the love for her child in her heart, not to be denied, certainly to be tested, but doesn't faith work by love? And she came with a heart of expectation that simply would not be denied. I put my hands on my young child, and I emptied myself out before God. And he answered. Oliver is now today 41 years old, has kids of his own, very healthy, vibrant young man. Young because I'm only 53, so 40's nothing. You know what I'm saying. I know, for some that may go in contrast or conflict with our charismatic views. You know, God only answers the prayers of those who are in perfect obedience. I don't know where so many different paradigms and but right here in the Bible, Jesus himself is approached by a heathen who has no relationship with God except she acknowledges who he is and comes with a heart, deep, passionate, sympathetic, suffering need. And Jesus ultimately cannot resist. I love Jesus, don't you? And I love my mother for making it to Jesus and seeing to it that she got me there. I often, did you see the sign that came up this week in churches around town? It said, when it comes to counting my blessings, I must count my mother twice. For me, that immediately rings my bell because, as you know, the panel of doctors told my mother to abort this baby, talking of me. She saved my life there. And then she's the one that brought me to Jesus and prayed with me to make Jesus the Lord of my life when I was 4. So I have to count her at least twice, if not many times over. I'm so thankful that she took the risk, often emptied herself before God, so that I might be touched by God and experience the goodness of Jesus. Number 4, the heart of the mother is a heart willing to sacrifice. Cleaning up messes perpetually. The making of meals nonstop. And the voice, oftentimes, of greatest motivation. I'll tell you, there's no one who motivates my children more than Wendy. It's a unique thing. I mean, I try. My motivation sometimes ends up with sounding like, what's the matter with you? It's not intentional. It's just the difference between the father and the mother. The mother is like, you can change the world. I'm like, you can change the world if you pick up the socks. You know what I mean. Or whatever else it might include at the moment. Did you hear about the little guy who, he was in the church play and he had prepared and his mother and him had gone through all of the lines and rehearsing and everything, and finally it came time to be on the stage and the lights were on and everybody was there, and he came to the production, got into his role, and then right at the time that he was supposed to deliver his line, he drew a complete blank. He's staring at the crowd. He finally finds his mother, and she's sitting there with the biggest smile of, you can do this. And so he locks in on the face of his mother, and she begins to mouth the words. So finally he beams up and he says, my mother is the light of the world. It's about true. Great encouragement. Mothers, I want to say something to you that it may matter because of the way things have come, or it may matter in the days ahead, but know this about your God. He sees the sacrifice. And He rewards in public. There is no substitute for the gift of a mother that is willing, when no one is looking and no one else could possibly know the burden, the sympathy, the suffering, to be a motivating voice, an encouraging, an inspiring voice, with all of the responsibilities of the day, of the family, of the life, yet stand strong so that others might be well and strong and fulfill the destiny that God has ordained for them. To all of us who are sons and daughters and husbands, may I remind you that God sees in private, but He rewards in public. And maybe the relationship that you've had with your mom has not been one that you celebrate on a day like today. And I'm sorry if that's your case. But the reality is you're here. You're alive, and evidently you're in your right mind. Thank God for that. You have a future, you have a destiny, you have dreams, you have desires. You're here, you're among friends and family. Even in that, if there's nothing else that your mother ever sacrificed for, she was used by God to bring you into life. Thank God for that gift. Let's continue on just for a moment longer. A heart of a mother is strong. Oh my, is it strong. I mean, just for this woman to approach Jesus. Imagine, again, 12 men surrounding him. And you talk about a man's world. In that day, it's a man's world. He's surrounded by 12, and maybe even more. He's on his way basically to a time of refreshing. He's getting away from all of the ministry and all the crowd, but the light shining in the darkness, it cannot be hid. She found him. She's from Canaan. He's the Messiah of the Jews. That in itself, don't you know the magnitude of resolve and strength of a mother? My daughter is in need, and I will find her help. And then, finally, when she gets there, Son of David, have mercy upon me. And he answers her not a word. The Word was silent. The Word, Jesus, is the Word, and he said nothing. I don't know that I've ever experienced that. If I did, I hope that I would have strength in faith to press past that. But that's real. It's one thing to be rejected by the 12. It's one thing to be rejected by other leaders. But when Jesus himself did not answer, that would have been a good time to turn around. This is not where you're going to find your help. No, she knew. So here, when he answered her not a word, the disciple said, she's still here. And she's crying after us. One translation says she is greatly annoying us. That could have hurt your feelings. I mean, you're at church, you're waiting for a word from God, and people are complaining to the pastor. You know, that guy's annoying. She's annoying. Don't you tell him to leave? That'd be a rough situation, wouldn't it? She's strong. She's not going to be denied. Oh, man. I want to encourage you, everyone, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, listen to this. Very importantly, mothers, emphasize, but everyone. If you are ever going to receive the miraculous promises from God, do not be offended by Jesus. So what do you mean? He may not answer your request in the way you want him to or exactly when you want him to. And if you are offended by Jesus, you could jack up the whole thing. Say, but I've been believing God a long time. Be strong. That's part of the characterization of the heart of a mother. You've got the grace and the strength to hold fast and the resolve of the promise of God. Don't let go from who you know him to be and what he's promised he will do. So he then, after he had not answered her at all, now he's going to speak to his disciples, but she hears it. He said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So here it is. Lord, have mercy upon me. My daughter is grievously vexed with a demon. He answers her not a word, silence. Secondly, he answers basically no. No. This isn't for you. Well, when he tells her no, look at verse 25. Then, after all of that, look at the strength of this mother. Then she came and worshipped him, fell prostrate before him and said, Lord, help me. She's appealing to his heart. She's appealing to his mercy. And finally, it's brought to clarity. Seemingly you ignored me. Seemingly you have rejected my request. But thirdly, I am asking you to at least address me. Help me. Lord, I'm not leaving. I'm here. I'm pressing in past all of these obstacles. Help me. And finally, he speaks to her, and you would hope for a word of encouragement. No, I cannot take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. How many times? No. There is a strength of resolve and a strength of faith. I mean, when I saw my brother laying on the couch with pebbles and sand from head to toe, I'm thinking, it's over. That is disaster. If you could see, do you know what a payday candy bar is? That's my brother with asphalt. Most of you know what a payday is. I'm impressed. I'm thinking, and all you nurses and doctors in here, you're thinking right along with me, how is she ever going to get all of that dirt and rock out of his flesh? She never even questioned it. Just get to work. And hours later, still singing. A bucket full of asphalt. Still praying and doing what was necessary to get past all resistance, to get past all doubt, to get past all obstacles, and bring relief to her child. Mothers are strong. Mothers are resilient. This is a gift from God. This isn't something that mothers just decided, okay, I'm the mother, I have to be strong. There is something supernatural in their design. I've seen it. I don't know about you, but I mean, when I have the slightest little cold, you know what I mean? I mean, my maybe allergies. I'm in the bed, fetal position, shaking, pleading for help. Wendy has 103, cleans the house, takes the kids, and I never even hear about it until it's all over. And I'm thinking, you are Superwoman. How is that even possible? It wasn't even a consideration that I'm going to lay down in the bed. So, did you know about the hungry 15-year-old who came home and he found his mother upstairs in the bed? And that was so unfamiliar to him. He said, well, what's wrong? Don't you feel good? And she said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm not feeling that great today. He said, no problem. I am very willing to carry you down to the stove. It's just how we view moms. They're tough. What are you doing laying down? I'm glad to prop you up down there, but let's get some food going here. The heart of the mother is marked with divine sympathy, a divine burden that she carries oftentimes in silence publicly, but a perpetual appeal to heaven until all of her children have been made well and have been touched by God. The heart of the mother is seeking the help and the hope that only Jesus can give and will not be satisfied, even through sacrifice, investing, and great resolve that I have received from God what I know only He can afford us. Don't be offended by Jesus. Be strong in your love. Be strong in your faith. And be strong in your vision. The vision that God gave you when He gave you your sons and He gave you your daughters, whether they are biological or spiritual, the children that you are privileged to continue to nurture and care for and influence and bring up in the things of God. Keep that vision strong and do not let anything talk you out of it. Because finally, this woman pressed through and she said, yes, Lord, in a heart of worship and a heart of honor and a heart of faith. Even the little dogs receive the crumbs from the master's table. Another way of looking at that is, she said, Lord, I don't need that loaf. I don't need that slice. And with you, it's not going to cost you anything. And it's not going to take anything away from those of the covenant. But what you have, even just a little bit, is more than enough to bring satisfaction to my heart and to my daughter. A mother's heart is satisfied when her children have been touched by God. In this beautiful exchange, Jesus finally turns and He said, "O woman." Other translations controversy as they are. He literally said daughter. So, well, why is that so controversial? Because she's from Canaan and she's not of Abraham. Either way, here's the thing. Her faith prevailed with Jesus. And if a mother from Canaan with no relationship with God to begin with can have faith that presses through all obstacles and all suffering and prevails with God, how much more we who know of our covenant with Him. This Syrophoenician woman, the centurion, who was also of the heathen nations, cried out for the healing of his servant who was at the point of death. And he said, Lord, you don't have to come to my house. Just speak the word only and my servant will be made well. What about Cornelius in Acts chapter 10 where the Holy Spirit was poured out again upon those who had no covenant with God? Here's what it looks like. We've all heard about the mercies of God. We've heard about the deluge, the storm of the outpouring of God's mercy that would come through Jesus Christ. This woman is like the first sprinkling on your windshield. It's like the first drops of rain coming down that says, hey, the rain is coming. And if we will press in by faith, friend, may we hear, your faith has reached my heart. May you have what you've desired. Mothers, stay strong in faith. Fathers, stay strong in faith. Let God continue to bring that fresh outpouring of His anointing, faith, vision, not only for our children, but for our grandchildren and those whom God has privileged us to raise in the things of God.